Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Casio Edifice EFB-108D-1AVUEF. This watch is available from Amazon.ie for €117. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in a cardboard watch box, which is protected by this white cardboard sleeve. So one removes the sleeve, and this is the watch box itself. As you can see, the lid is branded with the Edifice emblem and Edifice text logo, as well as Casio. So one removes the lid, and the watch sits in the base on a padded pillow cushion. The padded pillow cushion is upholstered to a good standard with blue fabric. So although basic, it does suffice in protecting the watch in shipping from any damage, and I think it's acceptable for Casio to be using this basic cardboard watch box, bearing in mind it's a low tier price point piece at only €117. With regards to the items that come with the watch, this is the owner's instruction manual in the form of a fold-out leaflet, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English and it's translated into a plethora of foreign languages. It details the operation of the movement used, which is the Casio module number 5664 quartz. In reality, the module number 5664 quartz is a rebranded Seiko Epson VX42E quartz, which is made in Japan. One also gets this warranty card, which again is in the form of a fold-out leaflet. It's translated into English and a plethora of foreign languages, and it details the terms and conditions of the 2-year international warranty. I want to give due credit to Casio here, because often low-tier price point pieces at €117 like this are only covered by a 12-month international warranty. So to get 2 years of international warranty is very good at this price point, and they deserve full credit for that. One also gets this leaflet, which is a fold-out leaflet, translated into English and a plethora of foreign languages, and it details advice from Casio on disposal of waste electrical and electronic equipment products for household use. So, the Casio module number 5664 quartz, which as I've detailed is a rebranded Seiko Epson VX42E quartz, is battery powered with a 3-year battery, and of course that's electrical waste. So this leaflet details how to dispose of the battery when it's exhausted. And lastly, one also gets this cardboard tag, which has Edifice and sapphire crystal, because the piece is glazed with sapphire crystal versus mineral crystal, and it states 10 bar water resistance and stainless steel case, because the watch has 100 meters or 10 bar of water resistant, and unlike many Casio pieces, it doesn't use a brass case which is nickel plated to look like stainless steel. The case is made from solid 316L grade stainless steel. On the reverse of the tag, we also have the full reference number of the piece, the module number 5664, barcode, and the reference number of the piece. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, we have a 42.4mm case diameter, we have a 47.4mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 8.8mm. The integrated lug width internally is 11.9mm. The integrated bracelet tapers at the widest point from 23.9mm at the head of the piece down to 18.2mm at the 2-button push clasp. 2-button push clasp is pressed 316L grade stainless steel, engraved with Edifice to sign it, and also the Edifice logo with high definition engraving. Beautiful luster to the brush satin finishing to the body, and that contrasts with the flawless mirror polishing to the flanks. 4 micro adjustment holes which are drilled in the flanks, and we have 2 button push triggers which are mirror polished to a good standard. No sharp edge to the top edge or the low edge, and we don't have any sharp corners, so the finishing is very good, but it is a light gauge of pressed 316L grade stainless steel. We have a flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver mirror polished handset and the brush satin finished and mirror polished applied indices. So the indices are applied and they have a 3D effect because they're faceted rather than just being flat. So they're brush satin finished, but the edges are faceted with bevels and they're mirror polished to match the facets and mirror polishing of the handset. Handset is correctly proportioned, the hour and minute hand look correct, but however the contrasting red second hand looks slightly too short. The tip of it doesn't quite extend to the white minute ticks on the chapter ring, so I'd like to see Casio improve upon this, and they should lengthen the second hand to make it reach the chapter ring. It does reach the applied indices okay, but it just looks slightly too short for the size of the dial. On a smaller dial watch, of course, it would be appropriate. However, I appreciate there's a mechanical reason for this, because the Casio module number 5664 quartz does have a long 3-year battery life. And as I've detailed, in reality it's a rebranded Seiko Epson VX42E quartz. If they lengthened the handsets, for example, made the hands longer and the second hand longer, that would deplete the battery life. So, for example, it would have a 1 to 2 year battery life versus a 3-year battery life, which is very impressive. By using shorter hands, it reduces the load on the module and therefore the battery, and therefore the battery life is extended by driving a smaller handset. Larger hands mean more power is needed, and therefore the battery gets exhausted quicker. So, Casio have had to strike a balance between using a shorter handset and increasing the battery life to 3 years, or using a longer handset and therefore reducing the battery life to 1 to 2 years respectively. 3-year battery life is beneficial, therefore I think it's acceptable to have a shorter handset as a result. So this piece weighs 133 grams and it's 100 meter water resistant. We have a push-pull crown rather than screw-down crown, and it's knurled finish, mirror polished knurling to it, nice large chamfer which deletes the sharp tips to the knurled teeth, and it's signed with an embossed Edifice emblem to a good standard, so good quality finishing, looks correctly proportioned, and the crown guards are also correctly proportioned. So let's test the push-pull crown execution. So pulling it out to the second click position hacks the movement and it's now in the time setting position, but first let's test the quick set date complication. So pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date. When you rotate the crown clockwise in the first click position, that's the quick set date. So as I've detailed, the module number 5664 quartz is a rebranded Seiko Epson VX42E. The VX42E has a nice positive clicking feeling when one is setting the quick set complication. In terms of how it feels lighter than a Seiko NH35A. It doesn't have the heavy clicking mechanism, but however it does feel light and very similar to a Miyota Caliber 8215, which you may be familiar with. It's got that light feeling when each day of the month clicks over. The date complication is framed in silver, which matches the applied indices, and it's correctly proportioned. The date window is large enough. The dial is thin, it's not too thick, and therefore it doesn't cast a permanent shadow around the white date complication. The single and the double Arabic numerals are correctly proportioned. The font is crisp, it's sharp and high definition, so the quality of the printing of both the singles and the doubles on the Arabic numerals is good. Legibility is good. Also, the alignment is correct. The Arabic numerals aren't too far to the left or the right of the date window. They're perfectly central and they're not too high or too low in the date window. So they've got the alignment correct, and also the printing is correct because it's nice and sharp and crisp. So feels nice and light to set the date. Nice positive clicking. Pulling it out to the second click position hacks the module 5664 quartz, and if you look at the contrasting red second hand, you can see it's now stopped dead, so therefore it's possible to set the time precisely to the second with the module number 5664 quartz. We're now in the time setting position. Very light resistance to the gearing because the 5664 has 0 joules, so very low friction to it, and it feels smooth both clockwise and anti-clockwise. Very light resistance to it. In terms of how it feels much lighter than a Seiko NH35A, and also feels lighter than a Miyota 8215, which you may be familiar with, and that's a characteristic of quartz movements like this. Feels very similar to a Miyota 2115, and that's the kind of feeling one gets with Miyota and also Seiko Epson modules. So it feels very smooth. Minimal backplay. When you rotate the knurled crown clockwise and anti-clockwise, there's an almost immediate response to the minute hand, and it's good. I like the lack of backplay in it. You don't have to take up a lot of slack. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the module. You can see the contrasting red second hand begins to tick around the dial once again. So quick set complication works well, and also hacking works well, and the time setting feels good. So it feels very satisfying. Push-pull crown is perfectly acceptable for a daily wear piece. It's not a dive piece, therefore it doesn't need a screw down crown. 100 meters is strong specification. It doesn't need to have a screw down crown in 200 meters, but for example, this is a daily wear piece or potentially a dress piece, so they could have just used 50 meters of hermetic seal. 100 is very good for a push-pull crown. With regards to the bezel, it's vertical brush satin finished to the top edge, nice large mirror polished chamfer to it, and that deletes the sharp edge to the brush satin finish top of the bezel. Low profile to the bezel, and the edge of it is also mirror polished to a flawless standard. Quality of the brush satin finishing has beautiful luster, and also the quality of the mirror polishing is exceptional, bearing in mind this is a low tier price point piece. I like the flat sapphire crystal, has a slight bevel on the edge which projects above the top of the bezel, adds interest to it, and it's nice and thin. So the benefit is the sapphire crystal sits very close to the dial, the legibility is very good. One can clearly read the handset and also the indices as well as the date complication. So quality of the case is finished to perfection. Brushed satin finish to the top of the angular lugs, which are brutalist, and then we have large angular bevels machined, which marks the transition between the top of the angular lugs and the flanks. I like the large angular bevels, which are polished to a flawless standard, no sharp edges to the transitions, and the tips of the lugs have been deburred and chamfered to a very good standard, so no sharp edges. Nice profiling to the flanks, 3D effects, because we've also got this nodule which projects on the left hand flank, and that balances the crown guards on the right hand flank. So nice angular profile to the crown guards. The facets or the bevels are mirror polished to a flawless standard. The profiling and also the proportions of the crown guards are correct for the size of the knurled crown. And this nodule, which bulges out from the left hand flank, has an angular profile to it, which again is brutalist like the angular lug. So really this does look like a Gerald Genta 1970s inspired design by Casio, and I think they've captured it very well because it does look like a Genta piece with the angular integrated lugs and the angular profile to the nodule on the left hand flank, and also the angular profiling to the crown guards around the crown. So does look like Genta design. Proportions are very good. Quality of the mirror polishing to the flanks is fantastic. No sharp edge to the undercuts to the flanks, and no sharp edge on the crown guard side to the underside of the crown guards, and also the undercuts to the flanks. So this head of the piece is finished like a mid-tier piece. To clarify, mid-tier is €500 to €5,000 respectively. This is a low-tier piece costing €117, but we're looking at mid-tier level head of the piece finishing. Let's look at the bracelet in detail. So, integrated bracelet, as I've detailed, the internal lug width of the centre of the integrated bracelet is 11.9, and at its widest point it tapers at the head of the piece from 23.9 down to 18.2 at the 2-button push class. So aggressive taper, and I think they've got it correct because this is a large head of the piece at 42.4. It does need a large bracelet, a wide bracelet with an aggressive taper. So on a 42.4 head of the piece, an aggressive 23.9 down to 18.2 taper looks correct. There's not too much meat on the bracelet because the links are very thin despite being very wide. So articulation is good. The integrated end links articulate freely, they don't feel stiff or kink, but however, the negative is we do have excess play. Longitudinal, lateral, side to side and up and down play, so it rattles. There is room for improvement. Casio could tighten up the tolerances. This is simply down to the hole in the integrated end link being too large for the pin. They simply need to increase the diameter of the pin or reduce the diameter of the hole in order to increase the friction and make it an interference friction fit, because as it stands it's a sloppy fit with too much play. Let's check the other side for continuity. Again, the integrated end link articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, which is good. Plenty of articulation, which is the benefit. But however, the negative is too much play. It's sloppy, it rattles. Longitudinal, lateral, side to side, up and down play in every single direction. Hole is too large, pin is undersized. They need to increase the size of the pin, the diameter, and decrease the hole diameter in order to increase the friction and the interference friction fit, because it rattles. Now, on a positive note, the bracelet finishing is fantastic. In terms of the brushed satin finishing, the longitudinal brushed satin finishing has a beautiful luster to it, and every single one of the centre of the integrated links is mirror polished with a bevel, and the quality of the mirror polishing is exceptional. At this price point, it's a low tier piece, €117, but we're looking at mid tier €500 to €5,000 mirror polishing and brushed satin finishing. Flanks to the integrated bracelet are mirror polished to a flawless standard, no sharp edge to the top edge or the low edge of the flanks. So visually it looks fantastic. Nice fine grained satin finishing, doesn't look rough, it's not a coarse grain of brushed satin finishing. The luster is beautiful and also the links are beautiful. The profiling is very good, doesn't feel stiff or kink. The integrated links articulate freely, which is good. Let's check the other side for continuity. Again, the integrated links articulate freely. Now, the cost-cutting measure is the use of push pins versus screw pins. But however, one has to be magnanimous and realistic about this because we're not looking at a mid-tier piece costing €500 plus. And at that price point, one would expect screw pins versus the cost-cutting measure of push pins. On a low tier piece costing €117, it is acceptable to use push pins, but the negative is it rattles because it's a sloppy bracelet, as you can see. Longitudinal, lateral, side to side, up and down play. So the positive is it articulates freely without any stiff links, which is good, but the negative is it rattles. So it's a sloppy bracelet, and that's largely due to using push pins versus screw pins. Had they used 1.2mm screw pins, they could have tightened up the links, and that would have reduced some of the slack in the bracelet, because it does have a lot of lateral, longitudinal, side to side and up and down play in every single one of the links. Cumulative effect of all the excess play is across the length of the bracelet, it then becomes sloppy because all of the excess play adds up. And it's the same on both the 6 and the 12 o'clock side, and that's something to bear in mind. So it does rattle, which is a shame, but however, visually, aesthetically, it looks very good. Aggressive taper looks correctly proportioned, the luster looks good, the mirror polishing to the centre bevels looks good, and I like that there's no sharp edge to the top edge or the low edge. On wrist it feels comfortable because it does articulate freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't pull arm hairs, so that's the main benefit. Finishing is outstanding at this price point. With regards to clasp, it's a clear cost-cutting measure because it's pressed 316L grade stainless steel. Now, beautiful luster to it, doesn't have a sharp top edge or low edge, doesn't have sharp corners, which is good. The undercut has been deburred and chamfered very well, so it doesn't feel sharp or scratch the wrist, which is good. And I'm pleased to see 4 micro adjustment holes. Often Casio pieces only have the minimum 2 micro adjustment holes in the flanks. To see 4 is good. This bracelet could be further enhanced if they added a half link on the 6 o'clock and the 12 o'clock side, because we only have full links in the integrated bracelet, and that's the negative. There are enough removable links to size it down to a minimum 6-inch wrist, and it will fit up to a maximum 9-inch wrist, so a huge variation in wrist size, 6 to 9 inches. But however, sometimes adding or subtracting one full link from an integrated bracelet doesn't give the correct fit because it's slightly too tight or slightly too loose. Having a half link on the 6 o'clock and the 12 o'clock side respectively does refine the fit. But on a positive note, we do have 4 micro adjustment holes in the absence of half links, so it is possible to still get the correct fit by adding or subtracting one full link. So as you can see, this is the main cost cutting measure of the piece: pressed 316L grade stainless steel clasp versus a solid milled stainless steel clasp. However, one has to be magnanimous about that and realistic because this is only €117 in the low tier. If this were €150 plus, I would expect to see a solid mill clasp. I would like to see Casio update it, but however, it is acceptable at this price point. On a positive note, flawless mirror polishing to the internals. No sharp edges to the flanks, and the centre section has been deburred, so no sharp corners to it, which is good. Let's check the hinge pins. Left hand hinge pin articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink. Unfortunately has significant excess play, lateral, longitudinal, side to side, up and down play, and it rattles as a result. So this is very sloppy. They really need to tighten up the tolerances of the pin, which is push pin, and it needs to tighten up because you can see the hole is too large and the pin is undersized, and therefore there's too much play. Centre hinge pin articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, but again, excess play, so it rattles. Finally, let's check the right hand hinge pin. Articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, so that's the positive, but again, rattles. Significant play in every direction. Cumulative effect is left hand, centre and right hand hinge pin have play, so the pressed clasp rattles, it's sloppy. But one has to be magnanimous and expect some cost-cutting measure. As I've detailed, this is a low-tier piece at €117. This is the kind of cost-cutting measure one is going to see at this price point. One has to be magnanimous. On a positive note, it does work well because it snaps shut with a nice positive click, which is secure, and the 2 button push triggers are heavily sprung-loaded, so they feel reliable and robust, and therefore they open the clasp freely, and I like the positive action of it. So I like the 4 micro adjustments, I like that it doesn't have any sharp edges, and it does open and close very well. Doesn't feel stiff, does feel reliable, but just feels like a light gauge of 316L grade stainless steel. I'd like to see a heavier gauge used. Let's look at the Caseback. Solid 316L grade stainless steel Caseback, concentric CNC lathe tool machining to it, refracts the light, which looks very aesthetically pleasing. Engraved with the specification, reference number of the piece, and also the Edifice logo and emblem to a good standard. So it's a very well finished, low profile flat Caseback. I like that it's perfectly flat. rather than being a bubble back case back, and that's the benefit of using the Casio module number 5664 quartz, which is a very thin and low profile quartz module. Engraving is very good, high definition and crisp, but it doesn't feel sharp or rough against the wrist. Therefore this case back feels very smooth and comfortable to wear the piece against the wrist for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. Circumference is mirror polished with a large chamfer, which deletes the sharp edge of the milled slots. The milled slots are deburred and chamfered very well, so no sharp edges, and the mirror polishing to the circumference is done to a flawless standard, and the concentric CNC lathe tool machining to the centre section is very well done. Refracts the light very well, very smooth, very well finished case back for a low tier piece. The integrated end links are a good tight fit to the head of the piece, and the underside to the head of the piece has concentric CNC lathe tool machining to it, nice large bevels and chamfers to the undercuts to the flanks, and that deletes the sharp edges. So doesn't have sharp tips to the four corners of the lugs. They've been deburred and chamfered very well. The undercuts to the flanks have also been deburred. No sharp edges to the head of the piece whatsoever. So the case back feels smooth and comfortable. Head of the piece doesn't have any sharp edges to cut or scratch the wrist. Quality of the head of the piece really is €500 plus price point plus mid-tier level finishing to the case back, bezel and head of the piece. Exceptional. Bracelet is finished to perfection. They just need to tighten up the tolerances. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet, and this does come with a very long bracelet. With all the links in the integrated bracelet, you can see I can easily slide 2 fingers beneath the bracelet and clasp at all times. On my 8-inch wrist, that indicates this would fit up to a very large wrist of even up to 9 inches. So, to clarify, there are enough removable links on the 6 o'clock and the 12 o'clock side of the integrated bracelet to reduce it down to a minimum 6-inch wrist size, and the maximum it will support. And we're on the maximum micro adjustment, position 4 of 4 on the clasp. 9 inches is the ultimate. So 6 inches to 9 inches is a huge variation, but this will be a concern. If you're a collector with a below 6-inch wrist size, you're going to have difficulty getting the correct fit. Even if you remove all the links on the 6 and the 12 o'clock side and you move up the micro adjustment to position 1 of 4, the minimum, 6 inches is the minimum. If you have a 5.5-inch wrist, for example, it's going to be too loose on your wrist. But however, needless to say, a 42.4mm head of the piece, this is clearly intended for collectors with a larger 7 to 8-inch plus wrist size. So, wrist presence is good. It does dominate the wrist, as one would expect. It's a large piece, 42.4. But however, it's deceptive because although visually it does look very large and dominate the wrist, it does have a rather compact lug-to-lug measurement for 42.4. This is 47.4. Now, you'll know from my previous reviews, I consider 48 to be the sweet spot. That is the perfect lug-to-lug measurement for all wrist sizes because 48mm fits a 6 to 7-inch wrist and also fits a 7 to 8-inch wrist respectively. So, at 47.4, it's only 0.6mm below the perfect sweet spot of 48. As a result, the benefit is this piece will fit 6 to 7-inch wrists and it will also fit 7 to 8-inch wrists respectively, but at 42.4 diameter, clearly it looks better on a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches plus. If you have a 6 to 7-inch wrist, you may find it's too wide, and although it does have a compact lug to lug. Now, the thing I like about it is, above all else, is how flat it is, how low profile it is, because this is only 8.8mm. This is the benefit of using the Casio module number 5664 quartz, which is a rebranded Seiko Epson VX42E quartz. It's a very thin module. So they've reduced the thickness of this piece. Excuse me. Even though it's 100 meters versus 50 meters, and it has a 2mm thick flat sapphire crystal, which does add some thickness. The flat case back is the benefit because this is only 8.8mm. Anything below 13mm is the sweet spot to easily slip underneath a shirt cuff. I often refer to 13mm as the sweet spot. At 8.8 is a very low profile thin piece. It's actually one of the thinnest 42mm pieces I've reviewed on my channel, and I've reviewed over 400 watches and a plethora of quartz power pieces like this with integrated bracelets. So, very low profile piece. Does look large, does wear with wrist presence, but on a positive note, the lack of heft enhances the feel-good factor and the comfort level. Although it's 42.4, it's deceptive because it's only 133 grams. I would expect this to be circa 150 grams plus, with all the links in the very long integrated bracelet. That's really down to the lack of meat on the bracelet because it does have an aggressive taper from 23.9 at the head of the piece down to 18.2. Because of the aggressive taper, it deletes a lot of meat from the links. The other thing is, often integrated bracelet pieces, which are made in China, they have very thick links. The links are very chunky, so there's a lot of meat to each of the links, and of course that adds significant heft when you have a wide bracelet. And the problem is, the bracelet doesn't balance the head of the piece because the integrated bracelet feels too heavy. With this piece, Casio have got it correct because the links are very thin. They're not too thick and bulky. There's not too much meat to each of the links. So the aggressive taper deletes a lot of meat from the bracelet, but also the links are very thin. The comfort level is enhanced. Also reduces the heft to only 133 grams. Now bear in mind, that's with all the links, and it's a very long bracelet to fit up to a 9-inch wrist. Even I would remove 4 or 5 links from this bracelet. That would reduce it to circa 110 to 115 grams. If you have a 7-inch wrist, you're going to be removing 6 links plus. That will reduce it to below 110 grams to 105 grams, for example. So at 133, even with all the links, it's a very well balanced piece. Doesn't feel top heavy, and I like it. Low profile, balanced. Bracelet balances the head of the piece. The only negative is the clasp feels too light. This would really benefit from a micro adjustment clasp or a solid milled 316L grade stainless steel clasp with a heavier gauge of 316L grade stainless steel. Because the clasp is very light, the gauge is very light, and it feels like a light clasp on a well balanced bracelet on a well balanced low profile piece. So it just feels like the clasp is too light for the bracelet and the head of the piece, and that does affect the balance of it. But on a positive note, the head of the piece balances the bracelet very well. The aggressive taper from 23.9 down to 18.2 looks correct. There's enough width on it at the head of the piece for 42, and it also rapidly depletes down to 18.2, which is the correct width for the clasp. Clasp isn't too bulky or low or thick, and it doesn't stick too proud from the wrist. Curvature is good. This will suit a 6 to 7-inch wrist and a 7 to 8-inch wrist respectively. Curvature is good, profiling is good, micro adjustment is good with 4 micro adjustments. Beautiful luster to the integrated bracelet. It's an absolute delight. Just look at the luster of it. The way the mirror polished bevels in the centres of the links catches the light. The articulation is fantastic on this bracelet. Feels very comfortable, no sharp edges, doesn't pull arm hairs, and I really like the shine of it. The luster to the brush satin finishing, very fine, not coarse. Mirror polishing to the flanks looks good, and the mirror polished flanks complements the mirror polishing bevels to the centres. The integrated links have a lovely shape, and the Brutalist angular integrated lugs matches the profiling to the links, so articulates very well. I really like it. I think the bracelet looks fantastic, the head of the piece looks fantastic. It's just a great looking piece from every angle. So feel good factor is 10 out of 10. Comfort level is 10 out of 10 due to it being only 133 grams plus only 8.8 millimeters thick. So it's not a tall piece. Flat sapphire crystal is the correct choice. Had they used a boxed double dome sapphire crystal or a top hat style crystal, that would have added 2 millimeters of thickness and it would have looked too tall and top heavy. The flat sapphire crystal is good. AR coating works well. Just a great looking piece, but clearly intended for a larger wrist. Right, so let's do a lume test and we'll see how the lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So this uses Casio Neo Bright, which is their proprietary name for Luminova. Neo Bright is not Super Luminova, as we'll see in the lume test. So as always, I'm going to be using my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and initially the exciter looks potent, but however, you're going to see it's quickly going to fade rapidly to nothing. So clearly we're looking at Luminova, which is C3 green tone, versus BGW9, which is blue. Now, you can clearly tell that this is 3 to 4 layers maximum, or possibly only 2 to 3 layers of Neo Bright, and really Neo Bright is just the proprietary name for Luminova versus Super Luminova. Casio really need to update this. They use the same Neo Bright on all their pieces, including the G-Shock, which are more expensive, and it's a disappointment. They really should be using, even at this low tier price point piece of €117, they should be using 5 to 6 layers of C3 Super Luminova or 5 to 6 layers of BGW9 Super Luminova respectively. They are the industry standards at this price point, and other low-tier Chinese brands are using BGW9 and C3 Super Luminova at the €117 price point. So as you can see, it's faded rapidly to nothing, and it's so dim that the autofocus on my camera can no longer focus. So I'm going to charge it up a second time, and you can watch how quickly it fades a second time. I would say this is a maximum of 3 to 4 layers, or possibly only 2 to 3. It's definitely not 5 to 6 of Luminova, and it's certainly not 5 to 6 layers of C3 Superluminova. Neo Bright is just standard grade Luminova. It's a clear cost-cutting measure, and a cost-cutting measure too far. Right, so you can see, with it fully charged, the autofocus can focus on it, but because it fades so quickly, the exciter lacks potency. It fades so rapidly, the autofocus then begins to struggle because it fades to darkness very quickly. So I described the performance as poor quality and a disappointment. It's disappointing to see 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 layers of Luminova used at €117. Luminova was acceptable in the 1990s and the early 2000s, but then it was succeeded by Superluminova, which has now become the industry standard in 2025. You're all familiar with C3 and BGW9 Superluminova, even on low-tier Chinese-made pieces at the €100 price point. So €117, this really does need to have 5 to 6 layers of C3 or 5 to 6 layers of BGW9 Superluminova, not Neo Bright. As you can see, it's now faded to nothing, so I'd describe it as negligible performance. In the daylight, it does look okay, because it does add interest to the mirror polished faceted handset. The white tone of the Neo Brights does look good, but in the darkness the green tone of it has negligible performance, so really needs to be updated. This is the main negative of Casio pieces, and from their low tier pieces to the more expensive G-Shock series, they use the same Neo Bright, which is very poor performance. Right, so let's discuss the movement use. So as I've detailed, this is powered by the Casio module number 5664 Quartz, which in reality is a rebranded Seiko Epson caliber VX42E Quartz, which is made in Japan. So the VX42E is made by Seiko Epson Corporation in Japan. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse quartz module. It's been in use since 2014, so at this stage in 2025 it's a reliable, well-proven quartz module. Has 0 joules, has hacking which works well, and a quick set date complication which works well, as I've demonstrated. The thing I like about it above all else is the 3-year battery life. So as I've detailed, the negative of this piece is this short second hand and also the short handset. The hands look slightly undersized for the size of this dial, but there is a technical reason for it, as I've detailed. Casio have had to reduce the size of the handset because this extends the battery life. If you use larger hands, longer hands, which are larger in proportion, that depletes the battery life because effectively the module is more power hungry. It needs more energy, needs more power to drive the larger handset. So what they've done is they've shortened the hands, and that has the benefit of extending the battery life. It reduces the power consumption of the module. So if they use larger hands, this would only have 1 to 2 year battery life, but it uses a shorter handset, and therefore the benefit is it has a long battery life, 3 years, which is very impressive. The other benefit of this module is it has a low battery indicator, which is also called an EOL, or an end of life indicator. And what happens is when the battery is low on power, the second hand doesn't tick 1 tick every second as it is now. It has 1 tick every 2 seconds, so it jumps. And when you see the second hand running at 1 tick every 2 seconds, that tells you that the battery is exhausted and you need to exchange it. So it's good. It's beneficial to have an EOL, end of life indicator, or alternatively it's called low battery indicator, to this module. 3 year battery life is good. Now the other thing I really like about it is, the other benefit, is this is incredibly accurate. The module number 5664, which is the VX42E Quartz, has an incredible accuracy of plus or minus 20 seconds per month accuracy. Now just think about that for a moment. That's not plus or minus 20 seconds per day or per week. Plus or minus 20 seconds per month is better than plus or minus 1 second per day accuracy. And I can confirm that this one is running at 0 seconds per day. Plus or minus 0 seconds per day accuracy. Perfect accuracy. So potentially you could purchase this piece and wear it every day for 3 years before needing to change the battery, and it will give you 0 seconds per day accuracy. Better than plus or minus 20 seconds per month. It's incredibly accurate. The reliability of this is incredible. It's one of the most robust Seiko Epson modules. The VX42E Quartz has been in use since 2014. The reliability is proved beyond question. They never break down. They're durable, they're robust. It's a reliable workhorse quartz caliber. The perfect choice for this date complication piece. So Casio have made the correct choice by using a Seiko Epson VX42E Quartz. Hacking works well, and also the a quick set date complication works well. Time setting feels good. 3-year battery life is good. 0 seconds per day accuracy, outstanding. I like everything about it. Feels good, works well, accurate, reliable, long battery life. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. Yes, this is unquestionably excellent quality, and yes, it is unquestionably excellent value at €117 in the low tier. Sapphire crystal with AR coating versus mineral crystal is good. I'm pleased to see Casio didn't use the cost-cutting measure of mineral or acrylic crystal at this price point. The VX42E is an excellent choice of module for this quartz movement. I really like it, so correct choice of movement. 100 meters is good. Screw down caseback rather than pressed on caseback is good, and the bracelet is finished to perfection. Beautiful luster to it. Head of the piece is finished to perfection. Bezel is finished to perfection. Caseback is finished to perfection. The finishing to this piece is mid-tier level, €500 to €5,000 price point level on a low-tier piece costing €117. The negatives are the Lume, the Casio Neo Bright, is negligible performance. Bracelet is sloppy and rattles, and there is too much excess play in the pressed stainless steel clasp. But, however, they are the only negatives. Feel good factor, comfort level is 10 out of 10. And really, at €117, it's an outstanding piece. I'm going to declare it a champagne watch for lemonade money. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Casio Edifice EFB-108D-1AVUEF. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.